history of reality. Part 1. The eternal question. There is perhaps no question more ancient, more profound, or more enduring than the question of reality itself. It is a question that has accompanied humanity since the very beginning. Long before the first cities were built, before the invention of writing, before science, philosophy, or organized religion, our ancestors looked upon the world with curiosity and wonder. They watched the sun rise over distant mountains, gazed into the endless night sky, witnessed the changing of the seasons, and observed the great cycles of birth, growth, decay, and death. Surrounded by mystery, they asked a question that every generation has continued to ask in one form or another. What is ultimately real? At first glance, the question appears simple, yet it conceals an extraordinary depth. The world presents itself through our senses as a place of constant movement. Rivers flow endlessly toward the sea, trees emerge from tiny seeds, flourish for decades, and eventually return to the earth. Civilizations rise, flourish, and disappear. Even the stars themselves are born, evolve, and ultimately die. Everything around us appears to exist within an unending process of change. Yet beneath this constant motion, many have sensed that something more enduring may exist. Is there an unchanging foundation beneath the changing world? Is reality merely the collection of physical objects we perceive, or does a deeper order lie hidden behind appearances? Are our senses revealing reality, or are they presenting only a partial image of something far greater? These questions have shaped the intellectual history of humanity for thousands of years. Every civilization has attempted to answer them. Some cultures understood reality through sacred myths that described the universe as the work of divine beings. Others looked to nature itself, searching for the hidden principles that govern the cosmos. Some philosophers concluded that reality is fundamentally material, while others argued that consciousness is more fundamental than matter. Some believed that ultimate reality is an eternal spiritual principle beyond space and time. Others suggested that reality itself may be an ever-changing process without any permanent foundation at all. What is remarkable is not simply that these answers differ, but that the question itself appears wherever human beings have sought understanding. Ancient Greece, India, China, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Persia, and countless other civilizations each developed their own vision of reality. Although separated by vast distances and often unaware of one another's existence, they were united by the same desire to understand the world and humanity's place within it. This search has never belonged exclusively to philosophers. It has inspired scientists, mathematicians, theologians, poets, mystics, and ordinary people who simply wish to understand the nature of existence. Every scientific discovery, every philosophical system, every spiritual tradition, and every theory about consciousness or the universe is, in one way or another, an attempt to answer this timeless question. The search for reality has also transformed over the centuries. Early humanity explained the world through myth and sacred tradition. Later generations turned toward reason and philosophy. Science introduced careful observation and experimentation. Modern physics revealed a universe stranger than anyone had imagined, while contemporary neuroscience continues to explore the relationship between mind, brain, and consciousness. Each age has inherited the questions of those before it, while offering new answers shaped by its own discoveries. Yet despite thousands of years of investigation, no single answer has commanded universal agreement. Some philosophers argue that only matter truly exists. Others insist that consciousness is the primary reality from which everything else emerges. Some traditions describe reality as an eternal and personal divine being, while others speak of an impersonal absolute, an indescribable emptiness, or a mysterious principle beyond all concepts and language. The diversity of these views reflects not the failure of philosophy, but the extraordinary depth of the question itself. Perhaps this is why the study of reality remains one of humanity's greatest intellectual adventures. It invites us to examine our assumptions, question the reliability of our perceptions, and explore ideas that stretch the limits of reason. It reminds us that certainty is often more elusive than we imagine, and that the pursuit of wisdom requires both curiosity and humility. This documentary is the story of that pursuit. Together, we will journey across more than 2,500 years of human thought. We will encounter philosophers who believed reality is composed of eternal forms, indivisible atoms, pure consciousness, the Tao, Brahman, emptiness, will, being, and many other extraordinary ideas. We will explore the great debates that shaped civilizations and continue to influence the way we think about the world today. Our goal is not simply to memorize philosophical theories. It is to understand how each generation confronted the same profound mystery and how their answers built upon, challenged, and transformed the ideas that came before them. The history of reality is ultimately the history of humanity's search for truth. As we begin this journey, it is worth remembering that the greatest philosophers rarely believed they possessed the final answer. They recognized that every discovery opened new questions, every explanation revealed deeper mysteries, and every generation inherited the responsibility to continue the search. The question that inspired them still stands before us today with all of its original power. What is ultimately real? Everything that follows is humanity's attempt to answer that single question. Part 2, Before Philosophy, the Age of Myth and the First Visions of Reality. Before there were philosophers, there were storytellers. Before there were scientific theories, there were sacred traditions. Long before humanity attempted to explain the universe through logic or systematic inquiry, people sought to understand reality through myth. To the modern world, myths are often regarded as fictional stories, yet to the civilizations that created them, they represented something far more significant. They were comprehensive explanations of existence itself. They described where the universe came from, why nature behaves as it does, what humanity's purpose might be, and how the visible world relates to the unseen forces believed to govern it. For the earliest civilizations, reality was not divided into separate categories such as science, religion, philosophy, and history. Everything belonged to a single, unified vision of the cosmos. The movements of the stars, the flooding of rivers, the growth of crops, the changing of the seasons, the birth of children, and the death of kings were understood as expressions of a greater cosmic order. The world was alive with meaning. Every mountain, river, tree, and storm possessed significance because nature itself reflected the activity of divine powers or eternal principles. One of the earliest civilizations to develop such a vision was ancient Egypt. For thousands of years, the Egyptians viewed reality as an expression of Ma'at, the divine principle of truth, justice, harmony, and cosmic order. The annual flooding of the Nile, the regular movement of the heavens, the authority of the pharaoh, and the moral obligations of society were all interconnected aspects of this universal order. Human flourishing depended upon living in harmony with Ma'at, while disorder and injustice represented a disruption of reality's natural balance. To the Egyptians, the universe was not random. It was structured, meaningful, and sustained by an eternal principle that governed both nature and human life. Farther east, in ancient Mesopotamia, reality was explained through epic stories describing the emergence of order from primordial chaos. In works such as the Enuma Elish, the universe comes into being through the actions and struggles of the gods. Mountains, rivers, the heavens, and humanity itself arise as part of a cosmic drama in which divine beings establish structure within a once formless world. These narratives were not merely tales of supernatural events. They expressed a profound conviction that the universe possesses an intelligible order rooted in forces greater than humanity itself. In the Indian subcontinent, the earliest Vedic traditions introduced another remarkable vision of reality. Central to this worldview was the concept of Letawani 5BTA, the eternal cosmic order that governs both the physical universe and the moral life of human beings. The rising of the sun, the cycles of nature, the performance of sacred rituals, and the principles of justice were understood as expressions of this universal harmony. Reality was neither chaotic nor accidental. It unfolded according to an underlying order that connected every aspect of existence. The preservation of this order became one of the central concerns of early Indian civilization and would eventually give rise to some of the deepest philosophical reflections in human history. Ancient China developed its own understanding of cosmic harmony. Rather than viewing the universe as a battlefield between opposing supernatural forces, early Chinese thought often emphasized balance, continuity, and relationship. Heaven, earth, and humanity formed an interconnected whole in which each element depended upon the others. Human beings were called not to conquer nature, but to live in accordance with its rhythms. This search for harmony would later find profound expression in the philosophies of Confucius and Laozi, but its roots reach back into China's earliest religious and cultural traditions. The ancient Greeks also began with myth. The poems of Homer and Hesiod presented a universe shaped by powerful gods whose relationships explain the origins of the heavens, the earth, the sea, and the countless forces governing human life. Zeus ruled the sky, Poseidon the oceans, and Demeter the fertility of the land. Natural events were understood not as impersonal processes, but as the expressions of divine personalities whose actions shaped the visible world. These myths provided coherence, identity, and meaning for Greek civilization long before the emergence of philosophy. Although these traditions differed greatly in language, symbolism, and theology, they shared several remarkable assumptions. First, they agreed that reality possesses an underlying order. The universe is not a meaningless collection of disconnected events. It is structured according to principles that give coherence to both nature and human existence. Second, they believed that humanity is capable of participating in this order through right action, ritual, wisdom, or moral living. Finally, they assumed that beneath the visible world lies a deeper level of reality that cannot always be perceived through the senses alone. These early visions of reality shaped entire civilizations. They influenced law, politics, architecture, agriculture, art, and religious practice. The pyramids of Egypt, the temples of Mesopotamia, the Vedic hymns of India, and the ancestral traditions of China all emerged from these comprehensive understandings of the cosmos. Reality was not simply something to be observed. It was something to inhabit, respect, and align oneself with. Yet as remarkable as these mythic worldviews were, they also left important questions unanswered. Why should one myth be accepted rather than another? Could the universe be explained without appealing to divine personalities? Might there exist universal principles that could be discovered through observation and reason rather than inherited through tradition? If reality possesses an underlying order, can that order be understood directly by the human mind? These questions gradually gave birth to an entirely new way of thinking. Around the 6th century BCE, in several different regions of the world, a profound intellectual transformation began to unfold. Instead of asking which god caused lightning, thinkers began asking what lightning actually is. Rather than explaining earthquakes through divine anger, they searched for natural causes. They no longer accepted inherited stories simply because they had been passed down through generations. They wanted explanations that could be examined, questioned, defended, and refined through reason itself. This was one of the greatest revolutions in the history of human thought. Humanity had not abandoned its search for reality. It had simply discovered a new way to pursue it. From this transformation emerged philosophy, and with philosophy began one of the longest and most extraordinary conversations our species has ever undertaken. The search for reality was about to leave the world of myth and enter the world of reason, where every idea could be questioned and every answer would lead to even deeper questions. Part 3: The Birth of Philosophy. Humanity begins to question reality. Around the 6th century BCE, one of the greatest revolutions in human history quietly began. There were no armies, no kings conquering distant lands, and no great monuments marking the occasion. Instead, the revolution took place within the human mind. Across several civilizations, people began asking questions that would forever change the way humanity understood reality. Rather than accepting inherited traditions without examination, they sought explanations through observation, reason, logic, and careful inquiry. The search for reality had entered an entirely new age. This transformation first became especially visible in the Greek world. For centuries, the poems of Homer and Hesiod had explained the universe through the actions of the gods. Storms, earthquakes, seasons, and even human destiny were understood through divine personalities whose stories shaped the Greek imagination. These myths gave meaning to life, yet a new generation of thinkers began asking whether reality might possess an underlying order that could be understood without appealing to mythology alone. The first of these philosophers was Thales of Miletus, who lived during the early 6th century BCE. Although little of his work survives, later philosophers regarded him as the founder of Western philosophy. His importance lies not primarily in the answer he proposed, but in the question he asked. Thales believed that beneath the countless forms of the visible world, there must exist a single underlying principle from which everything arises. His conclusion was that this first principle was water. To modern readers, this answer appears simplistic, yet its historical significance cannot be overstated. For perhaps the first time, someone attempted to explain the universe through natural reasoning rather than mythological narrative. Reality had become an object of rational investigation. Thales inspired a succession of remarkable thinkers, each seeking the fundamental structure of existence. Anaximander, one of his students, rejected the idea that any familiar substance could serve as the source of all things. Instead, he proposed the apeiron, the boundless or infinite. This indefinite and eternal reality gives birth to the countless forms of the universe before eventually receiving them back again. Reality, according to Anaximander, is grounded in something that transcends all ordinary experience. Another philosopher from Miletus, Anaximenes, argued that air was the fundamental substance of reality. Through processes of rarefaction and condensation, air becomes fire, wind, clouds, water, earth, and stone. Although these theories would eventually be replaced by modern science, they represented an extraordinary achievement. These thinkers were searching for universal principles that could explain nature itself. They believed the universe possesses an underlying order accessible to the human intellect. The search soon took an even more dramatic turn with Heraclitus of Ephesus, one of the most enigmatic philosophers of the ancient world. Heraclitus observed that everything around us exists in a state of continual transformation. Rivers flow, flames flicker, seasons change, civilizations rise and fall, and every living being moves through birth, maturity, and death. From these observations, he concluded that change is not merely one characteristic of reality. Change is reality's defining feature. His famous statement, "No one steps into the same river twice," expresses this insight with remarkable elegance. The river appears permanent, yet the water is constantly flowing. Likewise, human beings appear stable, yet every cell within the body changes over time. Reality is not a collection of static objects, but an endless process of becoming. Beneath this continual change, however, Heraclitus believed there exists a rational principle he called the Logos. The Logos is the hidden order governing the constant flow of existence. Although everything changes, change itself unfolds according to an intelligible pattern. While Heraclitus proclaimed that everything flows, another philosopher reached almost the exact opposite conclusion. Parmenides of Elea argued that genuine reality cannot possibly change at all. His reasoning was both simple and astonishing. Something cannot come from nothing, and what truly exists cannot become non-existence. If reality is genuine, it must always exist exactly as it is. Birth, death, motion, and change, therefore, belong only to the world of appearances. Our senses deceive us by presenting a universe filled with movement, while reason reveals that ultimate reality is one, eternal, indivisible, and completely unchanging. This disagreement between Heraclitus and Parmenides became one of the defining debates in the history of philosophy. Is reality fundamentally characterized by change, or is change itself an illusion? Can the senses be trusted, or must reason correct what perception presents? Nearly every major philosopher after them would wrestle with these questions. In many respects, the entire history of metaphysics can be understood as an attempt to reconcile these two extraordinary visions of reality. Seeking such a reconciliation, Empedocles proposed that everything consists of four eternal elements: earth, air, fire, and water. These elements themselves never come into existence or pass away. Instead, they combine and separate under the influence of two opposing forces that he called love and strife. Change therefore exists, but the fundamental components of reality remain permanent. His theory preserved both the permanence emphasized by Parmenides and the observable change described by Heraclitus. Soon afterward, Leucippus and his student Democritus introduced one of the most astonishing ideas of the ancient world. They argued that reality consists of countless indivisible particles moving through empty space. These particles, which they called atoms, differ only in shape, size, and arrangement. Every mountain, every tree, every animal, every human being, and even the stars themselves are composed of these invisible building blocks. More than 2,000 years before the development of modern atomic theory, they imagined a universe governed not by divine intervention, but by matter, motion, and natural law. While these remarkable developments unfolded in Greece, equally profound philosophical revolutions were taking place elsewhere. In India, the sages of the Upanishads turned inward, asking whether the deepest reality might be discovered through self-knowledge rather than through observation of the external world. They explored the relationship between Atman, the individual self, and Brahman, the ultimate ground of all existence. Their investigations laid the foundation for the many schools of Vedanta that would emerge in later centuries. Not long afterward, Gautama Buddha challenged prevailing assumptions about permanence and identity. Through careful observation of human experience, he concluded that everything within conditioned existence is impermanent. Thoughts arise and pass away. Emotions continually change. Bodies age. Even what we call the self is not a fixed entity, but a constantly changing process. Liberation, he taught, comes not through clinging to permanence, but through understanding the true nature of impermanence itself. In ancient China, Laozi described reality through the concept of the Tao, the mysterious way that gives birth to all things while remaining beyond complete description. The Tao cannot be fully expressed through language because language divides what is fundamentally whole. To understand reality is therefore not merely an intellectual exercise, but a transformation in the way one lives. Wisdom arises through harmony with the natural order rather than through domination or control. Although separated by geography, language, and culture, these traditions reveal an extraordinary convergence. Greek philosophers searched for the underlying substance of reality. Indian sages sought the ultimate ground of consciousness. Chinese thinkers explored the hidden harmony of the natural world. Each tradition approached reality from a different direction, yet all shared the conviction that beneath ordinary appearances lies a deeper truth waiting to be discovered. Perhaps this is the greatest legacy of the first philosophers. They taught humanity that the universe is intelligible. Reality is not an impenetrable mystery reserved only for divine revelation. It invites investigation. It welcomes questioning. It rewards reason, observation, contemplation, and honest inquiry. They replaced unquestioned tradition with disciplined curiosity and established a conversation that has continued uninterrupted for more than 25 centuries. Yet despite their brilliance, these early philosophers left one crucial question unresolved. They proposed many different explanations of reality, but they rarely asked how we can know with certainty that any explanation is true. Can our senses be trusted? Is reason sufficient? What distinguishes genuine knowledge from mere opinion? Those questions would soon be taken up by a remarkable philosopher who transformed the entire direction of Western thought. His name was Socrates, and with him the search for reality would move from the external universe to the human mind itself. Part 4, Socrates, the search for truth begins within. By the 5th century BCE, philosophy had already begun to transform the way human beings understood the universe. The first Greek philosophers had turned away from myth and searched, instead, for the hidden principles of nature. Thales believed reality emerged from water. Anaximander proposed the boundless. Heraclitus argued that everything exists in constant change, while Parmenides insisted that true reality never changes at all. These thinkers had asked what reality is made of, yet almost none had paused to ask an even more fundamental question. How can we know whether any of our beliefs about reality are actually true? It was Socrates who changed the direction of philosophy forever. Rather than searching for the substance of the universe, he began by examining the human mind itself. Before asking what reality is, Socrates believed we must first understand how human beings come to know anything at all. What is knowledge? What is truth? Can our senses be trusted? How do we distinguish genuine understanding from mere opinion? These questions became the foundation of an entirely new approach to philosophy. Socrates was born in Athens around 470 BCE during one of the most remarkable periods in Greek history. Athens had become the intellectual center of the ancient world. Democracy encouraged public debate, political participation, and the exchange of ideas. Skilled speakers could influence courts, assemblies, and public opinion through the power of rhetoric alone. Success increasingly belonged to those who argued most persuasively rather than those who necessarily possessed the truth. This environment gave rise to the sophists, professional teachers who instructed young Athenians in rhetoric, persuasion, and public speaking. Many sophists argued that truth is relative, varying from one individual or society to another. If an argument could persuade enough people, it became successful regardless of whether it reflected objective reality. Socrates found this deeply troubling. He believed persuasion without truth was dangerous because it allowed confidence to replace wisdom and popularity to replace understanding. Unlike nearly every philosopher who followed him, Socrates wrote nothing. He left behind no books, no formal philosophical system, and no carefully organized treatises. Everything we know about him comes through the writings of his students, especially Plato and Xenophon. Yet despite leaving no written works, his influence on Western thought is almost impossible to overstate. His philosophy lived not in books, but in conversation. Every day Socrates walked the streets, marketplaces, and public squares of Athens speaking with anyone willing to engage him. Politicians, poets, soldiers, craftsmen, merchants, priests, and ordinary citizens all became participants in his search for truth. He did not lecture them or attempt to impress them with elaborate theories. Instead, he asked questions. Simple questions at first, yet questions that slowly revealed hidden assumptions buried beneath everyday beliefs. He might ask a soldier to define courage, a politician to explain justice, or a poet to describe beauty. The answers often sounded convincing when first given, yet as Socrates continued asking questions, those confident definitions began to unravel. Contradictions appeared, exceptions emerged. Ideas that had seemed perfectly clear became increasingly difficult to defend. What people believed they understood often dissolved under careful examination. This method of disciplined questioning would later become known as the Socratic method. Rather than teaching students what to think, Socrates taught them how to think. Every answer invited another question, every assumption could be challenged, every conclusion remained open to further examination. Philosophy ceased to be the memorization of doctrines and became a living search for truth through dialogue and reason. Many Athenians misunderstood his intentions. Some believed he questioned others merely to embarrass them or expose their ignorance. In reality, Socrates believed recognizing one's ignorance was the necessary beginning of wisdom. A person convinced they already possess complete knowledge has little reason to continue searching. Only the individual who understands the limits of their own understanding remains capable of genuine learning. This idea is reflected in the famous statement traditionally attributed to him, "I know that I know nothing." Whether these were his exact words remains uncertain, but they capture the heart of his philosophy. Socrates was not glorifying ignorance. He was expressing intellectual humility. The wisest person is not the one who claims certainty about everything, but the one who recognizes how much remains unknown. At the center of Socrates' philosophy stood an unwavering belief that objective truth exists. Justice is not whatever society happens to approve. Goodness is not created by popular opinion. Beauty does not change because human tastes change. Reality exists independently of our beliefs about it. The purpose of philosophy is not to invent truth, but to discover it through careful reasoning, honest dialogue, and relentless self-examination. This conviction profoundly influenced his greatest student, Plato. If justice, beauty, goodness, and truth possess an objective existence beyond individual opinion, Plato wondered where these realities actually exist. They cannot be found perfectly within the changing physical world. This question would eventually lead Plato to develop the theory of forms, one of the most influential ideas in the entire history of philosophy. The life of Socrates ended as courageously as it had been lived. In 399 BCE, he was placed on trial, accused of impiety and of corrupting the youth of Athens. Beneath the official charges lay a deeper conflict. His relentless questioning challenged authority, exposed false confidence, and encouraged independent thought. Offered opportunities to save himself, Socrates refused to abandon philosophy. He believed that living without the pursuit of truth was a greater loss than death itself. The Athenian jury sentenced him to die by drinking hemlock. Surrounded by friends and students, Socrates accepted the sentence with remarkable calm. He chose fidelity to truth over personal survival, transforming himself from a philosopher into one of history's enduring symbols of intellectual integrity. His death marked not the end of his philosophy, but the beginning of its influence. Through Plato, Aristotle, and the countless thinkers who followed, the questions Socrates asked would shape the course of Western philosophy for more than 2,000 years. With Socrates, the search for reality entered an entirely new stage. The earliest philosophers had asked what the universe is made of. Socrates asked how the human mind comes to know anything at all. The search for reality was no longer directed only toward the external world. It had turned inward, toward the nature of knowledge, reason, and truth itself. Every philosopher who followed would build upon the foundation he established, and every serious investigation into reality would begin with the same question that guided Socrates throughout his life. How do we know that what we believe is true? Part 5, Plato, The World Beyond the Shadows. When Socrates was executed in 399 BCE, philosophy lost its greatest teacher, but it gained one of its greatest thinkers. Among those most deeply affected by his death was his student Plato. Watching the city of Athens condemn, a man devoted entirely to the pursuit of wisdom convinced Plato that public opinion could not be the final measure of truth. If the majority could sentence one of the wisest men in Greece to death, then truth must exist independently of what people believe. It must belong to a reality far more permanent than politics, culture, or popular opinion. Born around 428 BCE into an aristocratic Athenian family, Plato grew up during a period of political instability and intellectual revolution. He witnessed the Peloponnesian War, the decline of Athenian power, and the growing influence of sophists who argued that persuasion mattered more than objective truth. Yet it was his relationship with Socrates that shaped his life more than any other event. Socrates taught him that philosophy was not merely the accumulation of knowledge, but the lifelong pursuit of wisdom. After his teacher's death, Plato dedicated himself to continuing that search. Plato inherited two great philosophical problems from the thinkers who came before him. Heraclitus had argued that everything in the physical world is in constant change. Parmenides insisted that true reality cannot change at all. Socrates had demonstrated that objective truth exists and can be discovered through reason. Plato sought a single philosophy capable of reconciling all three positions. His solution would become one of the most influential theories ever proposed about the nature of reality. He began with a simple observation: everything we experience through our senses is constantly changing. Trees grow from seeds, flourish for a time, and eventually die. Buildings weather and collapse. Mountains slowly erode over thousands of years. Civilizations rise to greatness before fading into history. Even the human body changes continuously from infancy to old age. Nothing within the physical world remains exactly as it is. If everything is always changing, Plato asked, how can genuine knowledge ever exist? Knowledge requires stability. It requires an object that remains true regardless of time or circumstance. Consider something as simple as beauty. A beautiful flower eventually withers. A magnificent building crumbles. A beautiful face grows old. Every beautiful object changes, yet our understanding of beauty itself remains remarkably consistent. We instinctively recognize beauty wherever it appears, even though no physical example is ever perfect. Plato believed this revealed something profound. Beauty itself must exist independently of the beautiful things we encounter in everyday life. From this insight emerged his famous theory of forms. Plato argued that beyond the changing world perceived through the senses exists an eternal realm of perfect realities known as the forms. These forms are not ideas invented by human beings. They are the ultimate realities upon which the physical world depends. Every circle drawn on paper is imperfect, yet mathematicians understand the concept of a perfect circle. Every act of justice falls short in some way, yet we possess an understanding of perfect justice. Every beautiful object reflects beauty without ever exhausting its meaning. According to Plato, the physical world consists of imperfect reflections of these eternal forms. This did not mean the material world was unreal. Plato did not deny the existence of the world we see around us. Rather, he argued that it possesses a lower degree of reality than the eternal forms themselves. The physical world is a world of becoming. Things come into existence, change, and pass away. The forms belong to the world of being. They are eternal, perfect, unchanging, and independent of time. They neither come into existence nor cease to exist. They simply are. No illustration captures Plato's philosophy more vividly than the allegory of the cave, presented in Book 7 of the Republic. Plato asks us to imagine prisoners chained inside a dark cave from the moment of birth. Unable to turn their heads, they see only a wall before them. Behind the prisoners burns a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners people carry objects whose shadows are cast upon the cave wall. Having known nothing else throughout their lives, the prisoners naturally assume these shadows constitute reality itself. Now imagine that one prisoner is suddenly released. At first, the light outside the cave blinds him. The world beyond seems confusing and painful because it contradicts everything he has always believed. Slowly, his eyes begin to adjust. He sees the fire that produced the shadows. He sees the objects casting them. Leaving the cave entirely, he encounters trees, rivers, mountains, animals, and finally the sun itself. Only then does he realize that the shadows he once accepted as reality were merely faint reflections of a far richer and more fundamental world. The allegory of the cave is not simply a story about ignorance. It is a story about education, transformation, and the difficult journey toward truth. Most people, Plato believed, spend their lives mistaking appearances for reality. They accept opinions inherited from society, trust their senses without question, and rarely examine the deeper foundations of their beliefs. Philosophy is the process of turning away from the shadows and gradually learning to perceive reality as it truly is. At the highest point of Plato's philosophy stands what he called the form of the good. Just as the sun illuminates the visible world and makes sight possible, the good illuminates the intelligible world and makes knowledge possible. Every search for truth, every pursuit of justice, every appreciation of beauty, and every act of genuine wisdom ultimately depends upon this highest principle. The good is not merely one form among many. It is the source from which all truth, order, and reality derive their meaning. Plato also believed that the human soul possesses a unique relationship with this higher reality. He suggested that learning is not simply the acquisition of new information, but a process of recollection. The soul recognizes eternal truths because, in some mysterious sense, it already possesses an affinity for them. Whether one accepts this doctrine or not, it expresses Plato's conviction that the human mind is capable of reaching beyond the changing world and grasping realities that are timeless and universal. The influence of Plato upon Western civilization is difficult to exaggerate. His academy became the first great institution of higher learning in the Western world and remained active for centuries. His ideas shaped Aristotle, influenced early Christianity, inspired medieval theology, guided Renaissance humanism, and continue to influence modern discussions of mathematics, ethics, metaphysics, consciousness, and even simulation theory. Few philosophers have cast a longer shadow across intellectual history. Whether one ultimately agrees with Plato is almost beside the point. His philosophy forces us to confront questions that remain as compelling today as they were 24 centuries ago. Is the world revealed by our senses the deepest level of reality, or does it point toward something greater? Are truth, beauty, and justice merely human inventions, or do they possess an existence independent of the human mind? Can reason carry us beyond appearances to discover an eternal order underlying the universe? With Plato, the search for reality reached a new level of philosophical depth. The earliest thinkers had sought the substance from which the universe is made. Socrates taught humanity how to search for truth. Plato now asked where truth itself ultimately resides. His answer would shape philosophy for the next 2,000 years and establish one of the central questions that still challenges every generation. Is reality the world we see, or the eternal world beyond the shadows?